There is a category of geopolitical outcome that nobody planned, nobody wanted, and nobody is willing to openly celebrate. But that benefits one party so consistently and so structurally that the pattern is impossible to ignore. China did not want a war in the Middle East. It has real energy exposure through the Strait of Hormuz. It has billions in trade relationships with countries on both sides of the conflict. It has been publicly calling for a ceasefire since the fighting started. And yet, if you look carefully at the economic logic of what this conflict is doing to global markets, China's relative position, not its absolute position, but its position relative to its main economic competitors, has arguably improved. That is uncomfortable to say. It is complicated to prove. And there are plenty of serious economists who would push back on it. So let's work through it properly. The questions we need to answer are: what specific economic mechanisms would give China a competitive advantage from this situation? What are the real costs and risks to China that complicate the picture? Is there historical precedent for this kind of reluctant winner dynamic? And what should we make of it without overclaiming? Start with the mechanism, because it is not obvious. The intuitive model of an energy crisis is that everyone loses. Prices go up, economies slow down, demand falls, trade shrinks. And that is broadly true at the global level. But not all economies are equally exposed to energy price increases. And not all economies compete against each other in the same markets. If an energy price spike raises production costs by 10% in Germany, but only 2% in China, then Chinese manufacturers have just become meaningfully more competitive in global markets without doing anything differently. The playing field has tilted in their direction through external events rather than through their own productivity improvements or cost-cutting. Think of it like a race where everyone is running uphill, but some runners are carrying heavier packs than others. The hill does not benefit anyone in absolute terms. Everyone is slower than they would be on flat ground. But the relative gap between the lightly packed and the heavily packed runners gets wider the steeper the hill gets. So the question is, how heavy are the respective packs? European manufacturers are, for the reasons we have discussed in other videos, significantly more exposed to energy price spikes than Chinese ones. Germany runs a substantial portion of its industrial capacity on natural gas. Its chemical industry, its steel industry, its ceramics and glass sectors all face higher input costs when gas prices spike. Japanese and South Korean manufacturers face similar pressures on the oil and LNG side. American manufacturers are better insulated given U.S. domestic energy production, but they still face supply chain friction and commodity cost increases across various inputs. Chinese manufacturers, meanwhile, have several buffers. First, China has meaningful domestic coal and natural gas production that, while not sufficient for all needs, provides a partial cushion against import price spikes. Second, China has been the largest buyer of discounted Russian oil since the Ukraine conflict began in 2022. Russian crude that Western sanctions have kept out of European markets has been flowing to China at prices well below global benchmarks. So China's marginal energy cost has, for much of the past few years, been lower than headline Brent crude prices would suggest. Third, China has large strategic petroleum reserves that it has been deliberately building up, which provides a buffer against short-term disruption. None of these factors make China immune to an energy price spike, but they make it less exposed than its main manufacturing competitors in Europe and East Asia. The second mechanism is market share. When European or Japanese producers face cost pressures severe enough that they reduce output or raise prices, buyers need to source from elsewhere. If Chinese producers can maintain output at lower relative cost, some of those buyers shift toward Chinese suppliers. This is not speculative. It is what happened in the years following 2022. when the Russia energy shock hit European manufacturers hard. European market share in several industrial goods categories fell, and Chinese exports to markets that had previously relied on European supply increased. The current conflict is applying a similar pressure, potentially accelerating that dynamic in sectors where the transition was already underway. Capital flows are the third mechanism. When investors assess global manufacturing exposure and see that European industrial returns are being squeezed by energy costs, while Chinese manufacturers are maintaining margins, capital allocation shifts at the margin. Foreign direct investment decisions, supply chain diversification strategies, long-term sourcing contracts. These all get made based on assessments of relative competitiveness over multi-year horizons, and a sustained energy cost disadvantage for European and Japanese producers affects those assessments. Now, and this is genuinely important, the steelman of the counterposition is not weak. China has real Hormuz exposure. About 45% of China's crude oil imports pass through the Strait of Hormuz. China's oil import dependency has been rising as domestic production stagnates. The LNG that China needs for its industrial and power generation base also transits Hormuz in significant quantities. So, a sustained Hormuz disruption raises China's input costs too. It just raises them somewhat less than it raises those of Japan or South Korea, whose exposure is more extreme. In absolute terms, China is paying more for energy because of this conflict, which is a drag on an economy that was already facing significant headwinds in 2026. There is also a more subtle risk. China's economy is deeply integrated with global demand. If the conflict slows global growth, which all the major forecasters expect it to do, China's export markets shrink. The consumers in Europe and North America who buy Chinese manufactured goods have less money to spend when energy prices are high and growth is sluggish. A China that is relatively more competitive in a shrinking global market is not necessarily better off than a China that is slightly less competitive in a growing one. Historically, the reluctant winner dynamic has precedent. In the 1973 oil crisis, Japan and West Germany were the hardest hit among major industrial economies, while the United States, as a major domestic oil producer, suffered significantly less. The relative competitiveness of American industry improved in the years following the shock, partly as a consequence. Similarly, after the Russia energy shock of 2022, American manufacturing became relatively more attractive compared to European manufacturing in the eyes of international investors, and the United States saw meaningful increases in manufacturing foreign direct investment even while both economies were nominally allied against Russia. What makes China's position in 2026 different, and this is the complicating factor, is that China's reluctant winner status, if it materializes, is occurring against a backdrop of already elevated geopolitical tension between China and the United States. If Chinese manufacturers gain global market share as a direct consequence of a U.S. military action in the Middle East, the political optics are genuinely awkward for everyone involved. It feeds a narrative in Washington that U.S. military engagements consistently benefit China more than they cost it. And it feeds a narrative in Beijing that has its own complications. Appearing to profit from a conflict that China is publicly opposing makes the diplomatic positioning harder to maintain. Whether any of this reshapes the structural relationship between the major economic powers in the medium term is genuinely uncertain. Energy shocks tend to accelerate trends that were already underway rather than creating entirely new ones. The trend of Chinese manufacturing gaining market share at the expense of European and Japanese competitors was already visible before this conflict. This shock probably speeds it up. By how much and in which specific sectors is something that will only become clear once the conflict resolves and the dust settles on global supply chains. What seems worth noting, and I will leave this as an observation rather than a conclusion, is that the economic consequences of geopolitical decisions rarely fall where the decision-makers intend, and rarely spare the parties who had least influence over the decision. That pattern runs through every case we have looked at here. It does not tell you what any of it means for policy, but it probably tells you something about how to think about the next time someone argues that a major military intervention will have contained and predictable economic consequences.